how to stay present as a consultant and the other things that being present actually can give you as a consultant. Welcome to your Consulting Business Podcast. My name is Russell Pearson and this is episode number 39. Today we have another magnificent guest and we're going to be talking about how to stay present as a consultant and the other things that being present actually can give you as a consultant. We're going to get stuck into that in just a moment. Before I do, I'm going to talk about something I don't always talk about, which is the Forge Business Program. Forge Business Program is a program I put together ideally for consultants, experts, thought leaders, people who are wanting to progress their business, whether that's as a practice that is the profitable enterprise that runs around them, or the business that they actually can step away from at some point where the business continues to run. We've set it up to enable people to really build strong marketing and sales systems so they can have the clients that they want as consistently as they want. So if you're a consultant, if you're a trainer, if you're a person who sells expertise for a living, you might want to consider being part of the Forge. The Forge membership enables all the Forge members to not only have the week-to-week working with me directly on their business, but they actually get access to all the different courses and all the resources that we have available that are all paid and things that we've developed over the years. If you're interested in having a look at that, you can always contact me at russell@russellpearson.com. That's the email address, and you can always connect with me on social media. But today I want to get to introducing our guest, who is someone I actually bumped into not long ago and had a bit of a fanboy moment because he's someone I've been following for years. So please let me introduce him. Our next speaker is an author, business mentor, and Shire monk. Please make him feel welcome, Peter Cook. Peter, fantastic to have you join me.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome to catch up, and it was a bit of a coincidence too, because I was hoping to get you on the podcast at some point in time, and we literally crossed paths in a cafe. So useful.
Yes, it was a bit of a rock star moment. I was having breakfast with my mechanic.
Yeah, there
chatting
you go.
to him about selling his business, and then he came up and shook my hand and said, "I know who you are, and can you be on my podcast?" And,
yeah, I love a good fanboy, and it was definitely in that mode. So fantastic. But great to have you here for the conversation. I know your background has been varied across all sorts of different areas. So you've got a long history with consultants and thought leadership and things like that. Can you give the listeners just a sense of how you've come to where you are now?
Sure, through that frame. So I was a consultant in a big consulting firm. I started my career at Accenture, or Anderson Consulting. It was then. I did that for a few years, went out on my own as a business coach. Did that for a decade. Kind of been doing that ever since. So for 23 years, really. But
and we'll jump around a little bit if that's okay. How did you find the transition from the large consulting firm to being a business coach? Was it a big transition for you?
Massive. It was. I remember. So Accenture's massive. It's a big factory, and I remember, and we used to have IT support on. I think you dialed 8. So you picked up the phone, you dialed 9 to get an outside line, you dialed 0 to get reception, you dialed 8 for IT support.
Yeah.
And I remember. So at home in my home office, something wasn't working. I picked up my phone and I pressed 8, and then nothing happened. I was like, oh, I really am on my own here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I grew up through the design space and was very much into Photoshop and things like that for a lot of years. And because of the amount I was using it, the undo had just been brought in. And I remember I was working on a piece of written work when I started my business, and I went to undo it. There was no keyboard or anything available, so that was hilarious. So big change. Yeah, you had to rediscover all these things for yourself.
Yeah, and the bigger one was having to get clients too, because when I was a junior consultant, I never had to worry about that, and so actually having to sell myself was the biggest shift, and I completely underestimated what that would take. And this was a time people hadn't heard of business coaching. I'd never run a business and I'd never been a coach, so I had no right really to to be doing that anyway. So
yeah, it's interesting too, because I mean, there's a lot of consultants out there who are working for big firms. They have their frameworks. They've been taught and educated in the what is the role or how to get outcomes as a consultant. I think there is a right for those people to actually step into that space. It just depends on, I guess, how they're calling or identifying themselves as the promise that they're making. So, interesting. Just words.
Yeah, absolutely. And then 10 years ago, I co-founded Thought Leaders Business School with Church, and so went, had kind of grown a business coaching business to 10 coaches, brought that back to myself. So I went from a business back to a practice, then effectively started a business helping experts and consultants grow a consulting practice.
Yeah.
And then left that a couple of years ago. I've been just working a little with a smaller cohort of people.
Yeah, I think that's the first time we spoke, is when you were talking about some of the fundamentals underlying the sort of thought leadership work. But again, like you said, there's so much depth in your experience from the corporate right through. But you find yourself now in this situation where you are very much running a practice again. You're working on your own again, having to dial 8, I assume, at some points in time.
Yep.
And it seems like you're really enjoying it. But also there's this aspect of you that comes to the fore, which is the Shire monk, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so I'm also a meditation teacher and a monk. So it's a non-denominational, so it's not a religious order, but I've taken vows as a monk. I have a teacher. I have my own meditation practice. I meditate an hour to an hour and a half every day.
Yeah.
And have taken vows to not lie, vows non-violence, non-grasping, like this whole kind of almost a code to live.
Yeah, it's amazing. The first time I sort of came across this, obviously meditation's been around for a long time and eons, but I really hadn't dived into this area until I actually employed someone who was a monk, and they lived at a monastery with a denomination, and they told me about how they used to be, which was this very angry individual. And now they transitioned to one of the best receivables person I ever worked with, because they were so cool and calm and present. And they were in the middle of moving into teaching a lot of this sort of work. And so they took myself and our entire team through a process of learning meditation and understanding what it means for us. And it really, really helped for a lot of years when I was going through some real issues in the agency model, and enabled me to see a way forward. So what has it meant for you? This obviously the code's huge, but even just meditation.
Yeah, so it's kind of changed everything. Like if I think back, so 10 years ago, my daughters are now 10 and 7. So who I am as a dad, who I am as a mentor, professionally, as a husband, as a friend, it's like everything. Everything. So it's kind of everything's different. It's a hard thing to answer. But like a nice example was Amy, who's my 7-year-old daughter, and she's gorgeous, but she's a little bit vague at times. She's got a little head in the clouds, and she doesn't. She kind of like, she'll walk through the house and things will just trail behind her, and clothes will come off and they'll just a trail.
Aimless.
And I'm trying to get her out the door to get to school, and she's not going as quickly as I'd like. And so I'm like getting a little bit cross. And then she says to me, "Where's my daddy?" I'm like, "Right here." It's like, "My daddy smiles."
Oh, wow.
So I paste a smile on my face. All right. I'm smiling. And she's like, "My daddy smiles with his eyes."
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh." And it was a nice affirmation that her usual experience of me is I'm present with her. And as soon as I wasn't, she noticed. Like, it wasn't how she said it, but she noticed straight away. And she's like, where have you gone? You're not here anymore.
Wow.
And so it's, my girls get a dad who's most of the time who's actually present with them when I'm with them.
We'll get into that word, because that word's amazing. The presence and what it means as a consultant too, because it's throughout a consultant's career and life, work on a daily basis. But I'm also aware that meditation's a practice. And so if we use that as the analogy for this whole thing, I imagine the presence is very much a practice too.
Yeah. So I treat my closed eye meditation as it's almost like going to the gym and doing reps of noticing when I'm not present and coming back. And so I'm building that muscle of noticing when I'm not in the moment, noticing when I've gone off into the future or gone back into the past, and then coming back to the present moment. And because I've done so many reps of that over so many years, that muscle's stronger. And it's now almost automatic that I notice when I'm not present and come back. And then that happens when I'm consulting, when I'm with clients, when I'm in a sales conversation, is I'm much more in the present moment.
So if we take the practice that you use when you've got your closed eye meditation happening, without getting, I guess, too technical, although we can get technical as you like, how do you notice? How do you notice you're not present?
So it's so one of the things that's just getting a little bit technical is we're trying to create some separation between you and your mind.
Yes.
So we're trying to actually observe, like, rather than just being caught in the mind, trying to observe the thoughts. And then when you close your eyes is you just watch the mind. And then what'll happen is suddenly you notice you're off. So that's the noticing, is like, oh, wait a sec, I'm gone. And that's the moment where what we try to do is not beat yourself up for that. That's natural, and it's not. And just gently then come back. And we use a series of mantras in my style, but other people use breath or use imagery. There's lots of ways to do it, but essentially meditation is when you notice that, is then come back to the present moment and then just watch.
So I'm going to put a pin in that, because I'm going to use that later. That's really useful. So how does being present change a consultant and their effectiveness in that space?
Hugely, I would say. And one of the so I think there's just performance generally. I'll answer consulting specifically, but I was reading Tools of Titans, which is Tim Ferriss's very clever summary. A very clever way to get a bestseller is just summarized a lot of his podcast guests.
Yes.
And so he talks to high performers in business and sport and performance, and kind of drills into their routines and practices. And one of the fascinating things that he reported, and that is 80% report a meditation practice.
Yeah, that's right. He sort of does a benchmark of sorts.
Yeah. And then I went and had a look at, most of his guests are American. Like, if 80% of his guests have a daily meditation practice, what's that across the population of the US? And it's actually 2%.
Oh, wow.
So there's a fair gap between people who are, by one measure at least, high performers and at the top of their game. And so I think, like, just generally, there's clear evidence that meditation lifts performance, productivity, decision-making, creativity. But then specifically for consultants, one of the ways that we've talked about, you can break up the job of a consultant, and this is what we talk about in Thought Leaders, is to think, sell, and deliver. And each of those, kind of speaking personally, like I do my best thinking when I'm in the moment, when I'm present, and it feels like ideas come through me rather than I have to make them happen.
Yeah.
Sales is a really clear example.
So it's 100%.
One of the things that I talk about, like when I teach, so I also teach sales, and one of the key bits is to be not be attached. And where sales goes south is generally where we get attached to the outcome. Where I'm with you, and then suddenly I go, oh, I hope you buy. I really need you to. What am I? And then suddenly, but at that moment, and then you can tell, right? And now I'm no longer on your side. I'm now trying to maneuver or manipulate.
You've instantly broken rapport.
Yeah, exactly. And so we can kind of get this intellectually and go, okay, that makes sense that I shouldn't be attached. But then how do I not be attached? And the interesting thing is whenever you're being attached, you kind of have to be in the future. You can't be attached when you're in the present. You have to leave the present moment to go for your mind to go, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And so being present is the perfect antidote to that. And
I think it's obvious in the delivery side as well, because it's very much the same sort of concept. But if we then take, and I'll come back to the thinking piece in a second.
Yep.
If you're looking at ways to practice or work that muscle of presence, and we're looking at through the one lens of the meditation, and like we're looking at ourselves through as a third party in that, or our mind as a third party in that. Are we sitting in the sales conversation and being present with the client, or is it us watching ourselves be present with the client?
I think either.
Yeah, well, I love this exploration of the idea, because I think it's this is where we can get some real ahas as well.
Yeah, I don't. So when I'm sitting in my meditation, I'm consciously watching my mind.
Yes.
When I'm with you, I'm not, or when I'm in a sales meeting or when I'm with a client, all I'm doing is actually just being present. I'm not.
Yeah, so you're consciously watching me or being with me.
Exactly.
There you go. So it's the mind in the thought, it's the client in the sale.
Yeah.
And then I imagine it's the team and the other pieces, and actually being present with what's happening in the delivery versus thinking about the completion of the delivery, what's happening in this moment.
Yep. And the same when I'm with my daughter. I'm not watching my mind, but I'm actually just being with my daughter.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to unpack it, because like it's a really interesting thing. So who are you being present with? So present with your thoughts, present with your thinking. Let's say we want to apply that. Yeah. Again, I would imagine if we're considering a concept or something we're trying to develop mentally, it's not a case of watching our brain think about it. It's being present with the concept.
Yep.
Love it.
Yep. And then just seeing what happens.
How do you? One of the things that I took out of my early days with meditation was that the ability to be present is meditative in itself. And if I could find scenarios where I kind of had to be present, it sort of sped things along. And that's where my blacksmithing really came in, because if I wasn't present, I would burn myself. So it's very, very, very easy to be one or not. Do you find those to be those sort of third space type activities to be as useful as the closed eye meditation, or is really two separate things?
Yeah, so I think it's useful in that it gives you the experience of being present, of being in the zone. And there's lots of people who go and do chase that experience, because it's what so Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote Flow, talks about this as
right in that
being,
space.
As being like when we're at our best and when life is at its most enjoyable, and when we're in this state of flow, or when we're in the present moment. And so we might go extreme skiing or mountain bike riding. Lots of people do things that are kind of more extreme, or where there's a risk, or blacksmithing, where it's if you're not paying attention.
Yeah, you're either damaging things as the smallest, or you're really harming yourself as the biggest.
Yeah. And so it gives us this experience, but for most people, we don't have an access to it outside that. And what an effective meditation practice does is gives you access to that, not just in the right circumstance, but in any circumstance.
Yeah, daily. Yeah. So I would imagine your recommendation is daily meditation. Yeah,
absolutely.
And for those who've never done it before, you're doing it in a very consistent and serious manner. What would the benefits be for these individuals if they decided to start? They decided to take up the practice for a good amount of time, whatever that is.
Yeah. So I actually have one of the books I've written is about the science of meditation.
Oh, great.
So it's called
I'm talking to the right person.
It's called, Meditate on This. And I wrote it with a couple of PhDs when I was kind of helping our organization say, how do you sell meditation? And so these two friends who are PhDs in mindfulness went through all the studies and all the literature. And we found there's four. We broke up. There's lots and lots of benefits, and we broke it up into 4 areas.
I love this. Before you just started, I love this because I had not prepped you with 4 anythings or 3 anythings, and bang, they're there. Love it. Let's go. What are
they? Happiness, an experience of more joy and lightness in life. Health. There's this massive list of diseases and illnesses, physical and mental, that meditation helps with. Performance, which we've talked about. And relationships. So generally, we're less judgmental, more accepting, more present, and there's lots of double-blind studies in reputable journals that point to all these benefits from a consistent meditation practice.
And do you have a concept of like how long? Like, not time meditating on the spot, but how many days in a row, how consistent, how long before you start really noticing these things? I mean, I guess it's going to be personal from person to person, but
when I teach, so I teach a weekend course, and then we get people to commit to at least 6 weeks, because within 6 weeks you'll notice benefits.
Right.
So a daily practice for 6 weeks, you should start to see things.
I love that, and it pushes me to get just out of my forge and workshop and actually get back in touch with some of this stuff, because it is different. It is different, allowing yourself to think and allowing yourself to be present with yourself rather than just the task. Yeah, I love that. All right, where can people find out more about you? Obviously, you're an incredible business coach and consultant, mentor in your own right. I know that you're not taking on a lot of clients at the moment, but where can people find out more about you?
petercook.com.
All right, easy to find. I will make sure that's in the show notes as well. Peter, fantastic having this conversation with you. I would love to get you on at some point in the future to talk about more things that are really helpful to consultants, because I think this conversation really is. Appreciate you being here.
I'd love to. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter. What a fantastic conversation. I could actually speak to Peter for hours. He's a very thoughtful individual and has a lot to talk about. I think that was really much just a tiny little snippet of the value he could bring to each and every one of you. So I'd recommend going and checking out his website at petercook.com. And also, actually, while I'm on it, let's talk about the resource that I wanted to make available, which is Tools of Titans. This is another Tim Ferriss book. It actually talks from all the interviews that he has had over the years. He's been able to get the really good tools, tips, and insights from each of those high-performance individuals, and has been able to put them together in a really, really useful resource, which he's got there. I've also got another one that I might talk about in a few weeks that talks more about the life lessons that you can actually use, not just in business, but in life. But the same thing, Tools of Titans, it's not just for business. There are so many high-performance activities that will improve, yes, your business, but also your career and your life. So check that out. I think that's a good one. It was really timely that he mentioned it, because I was thinking of actually introducing it to you. Now, The other thing that I find interesting about meditation in general is even just the taking of time to do the meditation. Ideally, there is a lot of people talk about making time. And I personally don't believe you can make time. Like, it's physically impossible to make time. But you can certainly take time. And even just the process of taking time for yourself to do a meditative process or practice, whether you take 20 minutes a day or even up to an hour and a half, which is I think what Peter's working on, that taking of time really actually not only gives you so much, but it actually shows value for you as an individual, that you've taken that time and given it back to yourself to enable you to perform better, to enable you to develop stronger and more effectively. So I think taking of time, whether it be for your own professional development and actually taking time to say, this is where I'm going to do some things to develop my business, this is where I'm going to do things to develop my expertise, but also taking the time to sit and be with yourself actually shows the value that you're delivering for you, enabling you to deliver it for everybody else. There's a topic I think coming up very shortly where I want to talk about a Buckminster Fuller topic of precession, and it's the idea when you're focusing on doing this thing, all these side benefits are happening as well. We'll talk about more of that in another episode, but a lot of this comes from the ability to take that time for yourself, showing the value in you, which is going to enable you to help so many other people. Now, I mentioned it earlier at the top of the session about the Forge Business Program. Where does that come from? Well, I mentioned that I'm a blacksmith. Well, the transformation that we do in the smithing world is really about taking things like pieces of steel, very much like this here. Yep, simple pieces of steel. We don't need to change the molecular structure so much of this. We just need to get it to a critical temperature so that it will evolve. We can actually turn it into other shapes and change its purpose. So we've taken a piece of steel like this and actually change it into a key to give you all sorts of opportunities. It's a metaphor, but I'll tell you what, that's what we do in the Forge Business Program, is we help transform people and their businesses at the same time, enabling them to have more of the lifestyle that they want, right? That's what it's all about. So if you're interested in following more of these episodes, we've got a number of great guests that are coming down the pipe as well that you want to stay in touch for. Make sure you subscribe, whether you're on YouTube. You can hit the subscribe button and the subscribe bell so it sends you a notification when we put up new episodes, which is more than every week. I think we're putting a couple of episodes a week up, and there's also the shorts as well. It's also going to enable you to subscribe on the podcast. And something I noticed the other day, I didn't even realize it was possible, that you can actually do video podcasts on Spotify as well. So whether you're actually subscribing on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, we might start putting the video stuff there too, because I thought that was an interesting idea. Let me know in the comments, are you meditating? Are you using meditation in your world? Are you finding it helpful? Did you try meditation in the past? Did it not work for you? I'd like to have a little bit of a conversation about this. How are you bringing presence into your world? Until next time, stay absolutely passionate. I'd love to hear from you in the comments, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye for now.